to talk about the healing path that I'm putting together. I just want to kind of flow with it, read from my notes, and get some thoughts out. And I don't know, we're just bringing everything together. And by we, I mean mainly me, but this is a kind of a casual collaboration between a few friends and just a lot of books, other healers, doctors, spiritual teachers, philosophers, historians. None of the stuff that I'm coming up with is, my invention. It's really an amalgam of everything that I've learned, and it's the dots that I've connected from all of that, and what I think the final cream of the crop of the information is, as far as what is relevant to well-being and healing and living a whole life. So I'll just get started. This is not in order. It's a little bit all over the place, but hopefully the energy that's behind it gets conveyed. That's really the point, because this is just the early drafting out of the bones, the schematic of the healing path. Okay. First of all, it's important to understand that inner harmony starts with authenticity. Living your authentic life, living your authentic self, being in touch with who you are, and just knowing who you are, maybe just to start with, because a lot of people don't even know who their authentic self is. Getting back in touch with that is very empowering and illuminating and good for you. And for me, it was a big part of shedding a lot of anxiety, living in authenticity, and then from that, looking at my life with new eyes. I mean, once I know who I really am, how I feel, and I've separated that from kind of the junk thoughts that have been cluttering my brain from just, living life. I can see the world around me and my life with new eyes, and I can see what parts don't match my authentic self, and I can do a cleanup much better that way. So inner harmony starts with authenticity. Speak your truth and walk your talk. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Recognize the narrative, the inner conscious narrative, as thought created and ego driven. So it's not the higher awareness, authentic self that is driving the narrative, that's empowering and perpetuating the story about who you are in the world, like your status, your title, your rank, your accomplishments, just the story about everything that you've got going on. And not that none of that is important. Obviously, some of it is very important, and it's fundamental to your life and your happiness and your well-being. But a lot of people in modern day, their narrative is just full of junk, and they don't realize it. They're so caught up in it, they don't see it for the junk it is. They don't know that it's not in harmony with what their authentic self would be if they could clean it all off and see who that is. I want to talk about what I mean when I say source awareness, because I will probably end up referring to that over and over again for a while until I come up with a better word for it. But I know that the New Age spirituality people kind of have grabbed onto source as another word for spirit, and it also kind of gets used as like a creator being that has desires and has us doing things for it, and I don't really align with that as much as I think of it this way. So I'm going to describe what I mean when I say it. Source awareness is purified awareness, and when this purified awareness is allowed into the conscious perception, It is neutrality. It is what some people call 0 point. It is balanced, and it can't be otherwise. It is something that is beyond and outside the narrative. It's greater than the narrative. It's truth, whereas the narrative is a lot of illusion, really. The knowing mind that expands the consciousness to integrate purified awareness, it is ever expanding as it seeks its own purification and wholeness. It is released from fear, and it is cleared of distortive programming. It flows with trust. It is in harmony with creative energy. So think about that being the state of mind of source awareness, and that's what we get to when we're meditating, or if we're well practiced, or we just know about this stuff. Then we don't necessarily have to meditate to tune into that, but meditating helps practice getting there. So source awareness is something that a lot of people don't know about. They might have misunderstandings about what it could truly mean for them, rather than just an idea about another version of like a creator God. I think that knowing about it, that it's there and that you can tap into it, is huge. I think that's what we are talking about when we say recognize what is always present. It is that neutrality of source awareness that is beyond the narrative. And when we consciously let that aspect, that huge umbrella aspect of awareness into our consciousness, we aren't being polarized with the narrative. So I think all of that made sense, right? Okay. This stuff is more specific about the healing path itself. It's a non-dogmatic concept of manifesting our reality with intention. Again, I'm using terminology that has kind of been used by the New Age movement, and I don't maybe necessarily mean the same thing that everybody thinks I do by that, but that's what this is about, is narrowing down the communication. So that's what I'm trying to do here. Non-dogmatic, just meaning that I'm not aligning with any religion or official spiritual teaching. There's no dogma, there's no Bible, there's no, rules, I guess. It's more find your truth, learn to find your truth, learn to recognize it. If I teach anything, it's just to invite someone else to figure that out for themselves, to be an example that I did it, it can be done, it helped me. The world is a completely different place now. Life is totally different now. I'm liberated from a whole list of things that were invisible to me before. So anyway, I'll just move on. So these are the acknowledgements, basically stating where we're coming from. And by we here again, this can just be the collective healing arts practitioners, or anyone that's healing themselves, or anyone that just wants to learn this. We consider the possibility of simulation reality and study all the perspectives on this theory, including spiritual, philosophical, and scientific. Higher awareness, achieved from purification, wholeness, and balance, serves to build the better society, more so than energizing the opposition with anger and protest. We energize what we do want by giving it our focus and attention, by embodying moment to moment the ultimate goal, which is authentic, peaceful existence. We acknowledge that suffering may serve to illuminate a person through apophatic knowledge, but we also posit that much suffering common to society is anchored by a misidentification with suffering, and it is this awareness into one's own misidentification that serves best to clear the distortion. We acknowledge the creative power available to us within our words, our thoughts, our choices, and our intentions. We acknowledge the need to harness this power through purified awareness and a reverence for authenticity and harmonious living. We acknowledge the usefulness of a detoxified support system in the face of multi-generational programming, ancestral memories and trauma, and cultural conditioning. We acknowledge that many people fear their own power as well as their shadow self or their subconscious. Excuse me. We acknowledge the deeply ingrained fear of independence and liberation from the matrix of society. We acknowledge the ripple effect of each person upon the collective and the value of intentionally building the new reality through energetic ripples across the world. We acknowledge the value of simple living. We acknowledge that each person manifests his own reality and learns through direct experience his own truth. Truth cannot be verbally conveyed, it must be experienced and recognized as the authentic truth. One must crack their own shell of small consciousness. One's authentic self can be recognized apophatically by learning from this broken system what we don't want, by receiving the message through our inner discordance and frustration with the current system. Seeing how we are primed to become caught up in misidentifying the source of problems, chasing scapegoats and being passionately motivated by lies, and eventually, well-ingrained false beliefs. One must recognize the vast implications of the highly distracting false narratives which are constantly fed into our awareness as if vying for dominance, and they are vying for dominance. We acknowledge the usefulness of tools and techniques which serve temporarily to assist in the purifying of perception and restoring wholeness as a stepping stone to trusting higher and higher awareness. It is the intention energy behind the tools that facilitates imagination. Old programming comes off in layers, so you can do something such as using a crystal or a stone that has value to you, that means something to you, that called to you when you were in the store, was gifted to you, but it's come into your possession and you feel a connection with it. You've read that it gives calming energy or heart energy, whatever it is that gives you that bit of comfort. What it's doing as a tool is it's calming the conscious mind so that greater things can be experienced, so that you can stay in motion and not get trapped by the programmed toxic conscious mind. It is on the other side of this gesture of faith and trust that we can more readily consider that safety really was ours all along. The conscious mind must be restrained. Sometimes it takes a distraction, a concept, to get everybody on board with changes, with letting go of old narratives and beliefs. And by everybody, I mean your thoughts, your mind, your body, your just everything going on with you. It's not just one little aspect, it's many aspects. We acknowledge the true meaning of holistic balancing. There is no one right path for everyone, nor a list of absolute right and wrongs. One must connect with his own inner compass and develop his discernment, using his reason and full spectrum awareness to make his own choices moment to moment. I mean, that is huge to me. That is one of the biggest things that's missing when we go to get help with just figuring out life, because we've got anxiety or depression or rage or addiction, anything. we aren't given the simplest tool, which is to start seeking our own empowerment underneath all of the distortion. What we do encounter when we go to seek help is someone who's making that distortion more comfortable by either numbing you out to it or letting you kind of pamper the narrative in a talk therapy session. Either way, the things that are blocking a person typically from evaluating their own distortions is, they're afraid of it and they don't want to be confronted. And if anyone has the place and the the right setting and supposedly the training to confront this, it would be the mental health professional. But that just isn't how it happens for most people anyway. Needs, desires, and available resources, both internal and external, vary from person to person. So only the individual himself even has the insight to determine the direction that he needs to go to find harmony. You only know your inner life. Only you know your inner life. The doctor doesn't know. You can tell them all your thoughts and memories, and it's still up to you to work with all of your sensations, your reason and your memories and everything that you're working with. The path unfolds with the choice to embody wholeness. And wholeness is kind of the state of purity, which, nothing is 100%. We don't ever reach this total state of purity or clarity or where everything is just perfect and wonderful. That's not a thing. That's not what we're chasing. This is more about being in truthful awareness with the world around you, with the nature of life and the nature of the human mind, of human suffering, and living your life with that awareness, making your choices with that awareness. That is how we evolve as a culture. It's by seeing that we need to liberate ourselves from a construct that's serving to restrain us and diminish us. So it does take the free will and the activation of the free will to start making these choices towards wholeness, because we don't get the support just out there in the world automatically. It really has to be recognized within and then sought after, invited into your life. You have to consciously replace the junk with the whatever's going to bring you into wholeness, and that's going to be different for everyone. But generally, the energies underlining what people do is love and compassion, unity, creativity, truth and honesty, integrity, things like that. We acknowledge the value of fluidity of emotions when interfaced through purified awareness, and even when not seen clearly. Feelings should be processed and emoted at will. Now that probably sounds, I know it would have sounded like this to me if I would have heard this a couple years ago. It probably sounds to most people like we're handing over the entitlement for people to have temper tantrums and just to go wild. But these acknowledgments and this path is for the person who is already asking the right questions, that is already got their attention focused in the right direction, where they know if they're facing a polarizing emotion, they're not getting caught up in the narrative of it, and therefore they're not going to have this temper tantrum based on the narrative. The fluidity of their emotions and what I'm saying needs to be permitted here is just the natural fluidity of what we encounter as physical human beings living in this world. We need to not be repressing that. We need to be in tune with it, not afraid of it, and also knowing that it's not there to take us over. That once you just understand why you're not susceptible to it, you automatically aren't anymore. The fear is gone. And again, it's not like it's 100% forever for the rest of your life. There are things that kind of try to test and trigger you, but you are building these muscles gradually, recognizing these things quicker and quicker as the narrative and as an illusion. Who's calling? Decline. These eternal truths remain. It's the last thing I wrote there. We need to be fluid with emotions, not repressing them. They're not there to just make us go wild or off balance. Feelings are there to give a signal, to give a message, to register the environment, how we feel about things. It's the mental distortions that paint those feelings as having meaning that is not real, that then causes us to emote in ways that are not authentic. I don't know, I feel like I might be convoluting two different kinds of emoting, but hopefully I'm landing my point. Is this the end? No. Sorry. Okay. So, people in the healing arts field that have figured out that their clients like to talk to them will be happy to know that there's a reason why. I mean, not that there's a reason, but there's a way to figure out, make sense of anyway, why people have this kind of brain lock and the blinders that they have on, where you can have an intelligent person sitting down across from you who is just blind to their own words, that they're telling you the problem and even telling you the solution sometimes, but it's like they are closed off to it. I started calling that brain lock when I started having my spiritual awakening and just awakening to everything in the world, and I wanted to tell a few of my friends. And I thought, well, for sure the people that are already like activists or liberals or, you know, well educated, like they'll know more about this stuff. They probably have, you know, known about this stuff all along. You know, I'll be able to talk to them about all these expansions in consciousness that I'm having. And you know what? Brain lock. I ended up not having any in-depth conversations, save one or two friends. So thankful for them. Most people would just have a line where once you unknowingly crossed it with a word, a topic, a sentiment, like a shield just pops up. It's like a defense system has come up, and they are not really even hearing you anymore or making sense. It's like the brain has gone into like oh shit mode, and it's like repairing stuff, and it's maybe even telling it a reason to like be angry at you or something. It's interesting how people are triggered by certain things that they deeply believe, that they've never questioned, and that, I mean, honestly, it's hard to ask people to open up their eyes to new things, because when they look around, they're like, well, everybody else is going along with this narrative, this script, so we must all be on the right page, right? Otherwise, we'd hear about it. Otherwise, we'd know. It'd be on the news. Somebody would tell us. We'd hear about it on Facebook. It's all a lie. And that's just not how it works. That's how the system stays the system. That's how we kind of stay enslaved, is by not seeing the traps and cages and everything for what it is. So this information hopefully will shed some light into understanding that block in consciousness, not being discouraged by it, and seeing other ways that you can bypass. Sounds like you're pulling a trick, but we're not pulling a trick. We are just trying to clear someone's perception so they can sense their own inner truth. We're not trying to bypass the consciousness so that we can then plant an illusion or plant our own agenda. That's been done. Other people do that. A lot of spiritual teachers do that. Anybody that understands how the conscious mind works and how the brain works, just the information's out there. There are people using it for negative agendas to control people, to capitalize on our ignorance, basically. But we can get around this. I think, anyway. This is kind of theoretical, and I'm still figuring it out, like I said. Information opens the mind. Now, as to what particular piece of information is the right one for someone to start opening their eyes, I don't know. I know that 9/11 is a big one for people. When they are just willing to investigate that tends to open up a lot of people's eyes. And another one is the straw man theory, that is just as easy to search as the 9/11 stuff. And the straw man theory, if you don't know, it tells you about the history of the Federal Reserve and birth certificates, social security numbers maybe. It's how the system in the United States, anyway, it's how it works when you are kind of born and tagged and owned and you're a private corporation. And if you haven't looked into it yet, do look into it. It's very informative. Like 9/11, it is one of those things that it tends to be really frightening and unsettling for people, and they can, I don't know why, but some people just really get stuck in a cyclone of fear porn. And trust me, there's enough conspiracy reality out there that you can just spend 2 decades going down those rabbit holes, and you don't really learn anything different than you did after the first rabbit hole you finally looked at. You just, I guess, have more facets of knowledge to back it up. So I think once you feel like you have enough knowledge to connect some dots, and you see that, okay, there's a lot of illusion going on, a lot of wool pulled over a lot of people's eyes. Once you can just get that into your awareness and just accept that that is what's going on, there's really no need to keep tuning in to those things that prove that there's an illusion. I mean, it's a lot of negative stuff, a lot of dark stuff, and it is important for people to know about it, but not to keep tuning into it over and over again like it's a television show. That's not cool. But anything that kind of makes people look at the system is good. The system is the core of the matrix and the false reality and the false understanding of human life that we have. The system, well, I won't go into that right now because that's just kind of irrelevant to excuse me. So when you are asking someone or inviting someone, encouraging someone to suspend their beliefs, in a way you're asking them to suspend themselves away from their only known identity. Their version of themselves and their narrative is really just composed of all these beliefs. So, in their mind, they're probably wondering, well, what would fill that space if I didn't believe in all these huge fundamental structures of civilization, and all, just all, what would be the truth? If that's not true, what is the truth? And here comes the black and white thinking. It's the old mentality that it's still there. The mind is cracking open and letting the light in, but it's still got a lot of programming that it's viewing through all this distortive programming to try to understand the truth. Work with the willingness, because encouraging people just to follow their own interests and what is sparking their curiosity, that's the only thing that's really going to motivate them to face these things. They just can't fathom anything that would fill the space. They don't know about anything. The imagination is really blocked off. And a lot of that's due to our public education system. This lowered, this lowered limited awareness gets programmed generation to generation. And so when we know that our parents and our grandparents went through this, this same cycle that we go through, we go to work, we've got our job, we get married, we go to church, we just blah, blah, blah. It's totally normalized. We don't even question it. We're like, well, if something was, messed up here, we would have heard about it by now. This must be organic society. So I asked myself, what are the truths that many people find intolerable? And I think that generally they are the extent of government corruption, the extent of the mandated or forced exposure to trauma and toxicity from the womb onward. Sorry. The depth of the dark occult ritual practices, and the fact that the truth has been kept from them as well as everyone that they know. And what I found helped me when I realized I could not trust my old authority figures, and I needed a way to know who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, black and white thinking again. But what helped me, and what I think helps a lot of people, is to shift the perception into energetic discernment. Like when we talk about something having good energy or loving energy or happy energy or sad energy, these are frequencies, these are vibrations. Like everything in this reality has a vibration.